Welcome to the Resilient Entrepreneur Program. Thank you so much for joining. I'm looking forward to exploring the Resilient Entrepreneur Program with you. This program, as you may already know, was designed during COVID last year as we spoke to thousands of entrepreneurs globally, and we learned from them, watching them unfold what they did to keep their business moving forward. And then what we did is we reflected back on what they've been doing for the past years before, since we knew most of them. And then we reflected back what many of them said in 2008, 2001, and many other crises before, including wars. And while each crisis is different, we know that we could learn from it at least some fundamental to keep things moving forward. So I want to thank you for joining this webinar. This webinar is designed to give you somewhat of a 45 minutes overview of how the whole program works. And I'm hoping that with you being with us today, you get some nuggets that could help you unfold or support you to unfold your business as well. Now, these blocks that we're going to discuss today is not meant to be all like one size fits all. It's meant to give you the framework that you could utilize to keep thinking about your business and taking some actions for both strategy as well as tactics to keep it moving forward. So let's start. If you don't mind, allow me to share my screen with you. So give me 1 second and I will share my screen. I know that you're probably seeing the screen by now, and if so, just give me a thumbs up or, or in the chat or in the Q&A section, just tell me yes. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being with us today. All right. So we'll move on to the next slide. Welcome. Now, please remember, this is not the full program. This is just a 45 minutes or so overview of how the program works. And I know we'll be sharing many nuggets for you to take and do on your own. And of course, there's a workbook that goes with it, but you could develop your own. You're welcome to download the workbook, as well as, of course, you're welcome to join the course online as well. Would love to hear where you're joining from. I know we have many people calling from all over the place, and it'll be nice just to know where you're joining from. So if you don't mind, just in the chat or in the Q&A section, just tell us where you're calling from. It could be location. It could be maybe not necessarily location, but it could be like your office, your home, your car, your hotel room, whatever it is, wherever it is that you're calling from. Just a snippet about me. I'm the founder and CEO of International Strategic Management. Just a little background on it. I'm Palestinian, was raised in Kuwait and moved to the US during the first Gulf War. Those who are a little younger, and that was 1990. And then initially I started with a t-shirt business, wholesaling and retailing, mainly supporting nonprofit organizations raise funds for their causes through the sales of t-shirts. Then I learned how to bring perfumes and colognes, and I was able to do that for about 7 years, expanded in about 7 states, and opened up over 500 people working with me on that. And in the 1990s, late 90s, I started learning how to do e-commerce and websites. So I did a little bit of that. And then I joined retail stores, big department stores, Macy's, and I was part of their executive team, focusing mainly on turnaround departments. And in 2003, I founded International Strategic Management, where we initially started focusing on entrepreneurs who are underserved or minority or immigrant groups, and supporting them to create strategies for their business, create tactics for their business, and initially even launching some of their technologies for them, such as websites or email campaigns and things of that nature. Today, obviously, we do a little bit different things, which we support organizations that support entrepreneurs, in addition to supporting the entrepreneurs, and mainly all of our, let's just say, partners, they're focused on underserved communities or minority groups, things of that nature. I've been fortunate to work with thousands of organizations, from large to small, from companies that were pre-launched to companies that are been around for a long time, and have been fortunate to provide strategies on entrepreneurship for economic development agencies, as well as government, on what to do around entrepreneurship or small business development, from training to mentorship to everything else in between. Our work have been fortunate. We've touched almost 61 countries all around the world, almost every continent, almost. And we continue to grow. I think last year during COVID, we might have reached virtually, and this is why our map has not reflected that yet, 90 some countries virtually. We aim to aspire organizations that aspire entrepreneurs to start or grow businesses. And I want to bring this up because many times people say, first, this is awesome. Well, while it might be awesome, I want to make sure that we put it in the right frame. Our learnings and our interactions have come from these pillars that we work around, which is the idea of globalization, the idea of entrepreneurship, the idea of technology, the idea of education, idea of community. So all of the learnings that we will be sharing today came from people who are in these circles. I bring that up because you might be a different circle that is not here, that I wouldn't know what would it mean for them, but I'm going to share it from this perspective with this experience. You could see more of our numbers on our website, but here's a glimpse of it. We've touched lots of people all over the world throughout the years, and I'm fortunate to be here with you with the Resilient Entrepreneur Program that we developed last year, and we have been granted actually our copyrights, which is exciting to see. So what is this canvas? This was based on the learnings of what we heard, then we reflected, and then really started thinking about what people didn't tell us that we know that they were doing or how they got there. And what we realized, they all had themes. I'm going to call them themes or framework. And this is the framework. Now, to some could be naturally come to you this way. For those who've been doing it like this, you might start recognizing like, whoa, I never thought about it, but that's exactly what I did. And that's the goal. The goal is to take the framework of people doing things to keep things moving forward and provide it to those who might have not thought about it, or those who did it so far and so long or so fast that they did not know the process that they went through. So now you can learn the process and start doing it exactly for you. You can download this canvas from our website, which is myisminc.com, and you're welcome to do that. It's we provide it for free. We try to do the free thing for everyone so everyone can have a chance to do what they want to do. And then, of course, if you want to download the workbook, there's a small charge for that. And if you, of course, want to take the whole course with us, which is over 5 weeks and go up to 11 weeks, we have different ways that you could do it with us, from either do it yourself to do it with a coach, or to do it with a full coaching and training sessions. Anyway, the canvas is here. So let's start with that. We're going to start first with the mindset. We're going to talk about the self. And remember, you might think this is naturally to some of you, but many did not really think about it in this way. And we're going to talk about the business and the 4 pillars within those business, and we're going to talk about the moving forward. One thing you will learn throughout this whole process with this Resilient Entrepreneur Program, it's really about adapting, consistently adapting to whatever change is going to happen. And those who've been going with us through this COVID-19 or any other crisis in the past, you will know really quickly that they're always changing. Initially, it was 2 weeks stay at home. Then you could go with a mask. Then you can't go unless it's necessary. Then it came with the shots. Then some buildings open, some buildings didn't. Some will require to wear it, some didn't. So it's always changing. And it's going to continue to change. And I believe in any crisis, the one thing that's consistent is change. And even in normal days, one thing that's consistent is change. The difference would be is how fast the changes are coming and whether you could plan for some of it or not. So let's talk about the mindset. What we've learned from watching these entrepreneurs and working with them, that they have a specific mindset, especially during crisis. And what I want to talk about is these 3 mindsets that we usually would spend days, obviously, on this. But today I'm going to spend a little bit of time just to give you the nuggets that you could think about for each one of them. So the first one is entrepreneurship. Many of you are already an entrepreneur because you started a business. You might have started it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago. We've worked with some 60 years ago or so on. And what we've learned is that mindset sometimes, as you continue to be comfortable, might shift or might take a different directions because you're no longer looking for opportunities. You're no longer looking to solve problems in the way that you started the business. So I want to remind you, this is all about leveraging the resources and looking around how to convert a problem or a challenge into an opportunity that you could maybe provide a service or a product for someone. Now, I know many people think entrepreneurship is business, and I always say yes and no. Entrepreneurship is more of a mindset of looking at a problem and seeing, or an opportunity, and seeing how you could provide a product or a service to solve it, or to provide an opportunity for someone. Where a business is somewhat of a system in place that knows exactly what they're doing with the problems or challenges they're facing. I think Steve Blank did a great job summarizing that, saying, a startup in a way is an organization that is in search for its business model, where a business has a business model that they want to just continue to do more of or expand on, depending on what they're wanting to do. Now, the entrepreneur can really fit both of those categories, whether it's a startup phase or a small business phase or medium phase, because it's the person who's running it and the mindset that they have about what they could do with what they have. You got to craft an opportunity. If there are problems, you got to think about opportunities. So you got to find what opportunities you have. You have to craft them. So sometimes they come easy, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you have to think through them, sometimes you don't. Sometimes they're staring at you, sometimes they're not. And during crisis, you have to be really creative, because your mind might have been going to, I'm going to call survivor mode. And the reality is, it could be an opportunity for you to be expanding mode. But that takes a shift. It takes a different way of thinking, a different mindset. So entrepreneurship is one way for you to think about it, thinking like an entrepreneur, reflecting back on the journey that you took to be here today. The mindset of a leadership is, when you are going through a crisis or going through such times like now, you might want to think about that you may be the only person doing that. Those who were early adopters, meaning that they flipped the switch from saying, okay, I'll do a curbside pickup. Okay, I'll do a delivery. I'll increase my delivery. I'll increase the way I could have people pick up merchandise from me. Those who were able to adapt that to that new norm were able to be the leaders in it. And sure, they might have had to trip down or fall, or they might have to figure out a different way to do it, or they find a way that is maybe not as easy to do it. And this is something about leadership, right? Sometimes you might think or be the only person there by yourself. Well, that's what it takes to be a leader. And one thing we've talked about in the past is about leadership. Many times you'll say it's about people following me. It's not really. Leadership is about the opportunity for others to want to follow you. Whether they follow you or not, this is up to them. And you as a leader have to think about, do I want to keep going with this path or not? And if I'm standing alone, is it with time that someone else is going to follow me or not? It takes a community for a leader to be one. So with that being said, you might have to take some steps on your own. You might have to make those things happen. So you want to think like an entrepreneur, act like and be like an entrepreneur, and find those opportunities, but you may also have to be the first one doing it. The mindset of compassion is vital during crisis, because while maybe during normal times you might not need to be compassionate, during crisis you have to be compassionate. People are losing, their loved ones. Some people are getting sick. You have to be compassion with the people that you work with. You have to show some compassion to the people that you serve. You have to show some compassion to the community that you're in. Now, I've been lucky to work with many entrepreneurs that they do that anyway. I'm just bringing this up because what we've learned throughout the process, again, reflecting back and listening to what they said or did, or saw what they did, is that they had compassion. They might have not said that, but that's what they did. So think about having a compassion through the process of your business. Many of you might have gone through our regular entrepreneurship programs. I'm going to call it like Exploring or Fast Track or any of the other curriculums that we deliver. And you might have seen this image. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I want to give you a glimpse on it, just a French reminder that in these 4 phases of you starting a business, you're going to feel like somewhat unfamiliar territory. Well, this is exactly where you are today with such a crisis, right? You might feel like you're unfamiliar territory. But not only you are in unfamiliar territory, the whole community might be in unfamiliar territory. So it's going to add a little bit more, I'm going to call it maybe stress, sometimes maybe, maybe pressure on you to perform, and you have to think about it and you have to figure it out. The good news, you've done this before. And those who have not yet, you might want to explore some of our other programs that could get you to thinking like an entrepreneur. And that's really the steps that you will be taking. First, taking some of those seeds, thinking about them, then feeding them. And that's exactly what you're doing, except you're doing it during a crisis, and you're doing it in a way that may be faster or a little bit different than you normally would have done. Those who said, let's do curbside pickups, probably never thought about their restaurants being that way or their store doing that, because they opened this beautiful store to serve the community in it. But remember, one thing will happen is changes will continue to change. And as we know that this crisis specifically, many of the experts, and I'm not one of them, many of the experts in the healthcare industry said that this is going to take somewhere between 18 months to 3 years, potentially 5. Well, if you have that in mind up front, you can start now planning and budgeting the changes that could come with it and how you could adapt to it to make it work for you. This framework of this entrepreneurship, leadership, and compassion will allow you to move forward, will allow you to think about what you can do versus what is being done to you or what situations are you in today. So that's the mindset, and that's the first step of the resilient entrepreneur. The whole concept of being a victim versus victorious is important, because you want to continue developing your mindset on that I can't be a victim of the situation. I'm going to be the victorious solving this problem and take a victory on it, because again, any challenge is an opportunity somewhere, so you can turn it around to however way you want it to be. So think about that mindset with it. So now that you have the mindsets, with you, let's go ahead and talk about you, right? This is self. And there are 2 categories within the self that we have learned that people do. First, it's all about you. So that's the me category, and you can see that in the box. And then it's all about what's around you. This is the network that you have, or the support system, or the family, and everything else around it, right? So this is what you want to think about when you're thinking about the self. So first, the mindset, second, the self. And in the self, we're talking about 2 different things, you and in the community that you're in, or the people that are around you. So, by the way, I would love to hear from you in the chat, just to keep you engaged with us here. I know we've been going for like 10 minutes or so. Why do you do what you do, right? This is part of knowing yourself. Why do you do what you do? So let's talk about me, right? Or you yourself initially. You're going to think about these 5 ideas or concepts that we learned from people who are really doing well during crisis. One is you want to acknowledge that you are in a crisis right now. While many say, I don't want to participate in this. Well, you don't have to participate, but knowing that there's a crisis around you, it might have been affecting you, but it's affecting a lot of other people. You might say, well, I've never seen anyone or heard of anyone, that's being sick. Well, that's nice. And I'm happy to hear that for you. And the fortunate thing, or the unfortunate thing, is many others have been. So acknowledging that you are in the mix of something is really important. Then what we've learned is it's okay to freak out. Now, you don't want to freak out for a month or 2. You can freak out for a minute or 2, but you're going to move forward. You're going to move to actions really quick. So once you freak out and you're done with the freaking out section, move to the action, right? Thinking about what can I do with what I have right now? And then check the facts. One of the things that we've learned from many of the entrepreneurs that we work with, and many leaders as well, is that they check the facts. If someone says it's time to reopen, well, sure, but what are the facts to make that real or not? Unfortunately, when there's a crisis, many people might say something that they don't even know. And as we all have seen in the past, someone might retweet something or repost something that the facts have not been checked, and now it's being read by millions to people think that it's the reality. Well, you need to check the facts by checking the information source, checking who's saying it, when did they say it, did they really say it, or did someone else say it? Especially today with this whole media accessibility as well as media editing power, that even a kid could now make it look like someone said something or did something. You might want to check the sources and check the facts and see if it's legit or not. This is really making sure that you stay still and making sure that you're okay, because without you, you can't really do much about anything else we're going to talk about. So your mindset will lead to you, and then you got to make sure that you're okay by following some of these steps. Then you want to look at what's around you. And what we've learned is sometimes people are not aware of what's surrounding them. They're surrounded by people who maybe they could leverage, or resources that they could leverage. Maybe you have a house and you have a garage that you could reuse for something else. Maybe you have a guest room that most likely no guests will be coming to, so you could convert to a small office for now, or a warehouse. Think about what can you leverage, what's around you to keep you moving forward. And one thing I've learned is many times these entrepreneurs and leaders, they let go of what they can't control. So worry about what you can control and focus on it and let go of what you can't control. If there's a shutdown and it's being told to you by your government, you like it or not, you're gonna have to shut down unless you want to go to jail or break the law, right? So for that to be understood, you can't control that. Now, do you want to change it? Sure, you should change it, and you should, make sure that your voices are heard, and you make sure to follow all those legal procedures to make that voices heard as well. And what you want to do is long term, you want to worry about it, but short term, you got to let go of it so you can worry about what you can control, which is keeping your business moving forward, and then making sure that your voices are heard for long term change. And remember, challenges are opportunities. So look around you and see what's happening around you. Are there opportunities for me to provide? Are there challenges that are rising up that could potentially be an opportunity to provide a service? And then, of course, repurpose some of the things that you may have. Maybe you have 2 monitors. Do you need 2 monitors? Maybe you have 1 TV that could be converted to a screen for your computer, so you don't have to buy another screen. Think about what you could be repurposing within your home. Maybe you have a bookshelf that you will not be using, or excuse me, or a closet that could be reused for something else. So think through that of what can be done to repurpose what you may have. And then, of course, lead by moving forward and keep going, because that's what's around you needs to see that you're also doing it, right? Because it's a two-way street. You're looking for them and they're looking for you. You might want to lead and move forward with what's around you. One thing you'll see about yourself is you don't want to be, we're going to call it stagnant, right? You don't want to stand still, because if you're just stunned by what's happening, unfortunately, it might be too late by the time you recognize what needs to happen for you to move forward. You want to be resilient by looking around, accepting, adapting, and moving forward with what's happening, because there's not much time to stand still for you to be there. So you stand still for a minute, like I said earlier, acknowledge, freak out, do whatever, but then move to actions and say, what can I do? Of course, having a power of strategy could also help as well. Then we're going to move to the business. And like I said earlier, there are 4 components within the business section that you want to think about. And I know many people say, well, I wish I could just be in this section. Well, I understand if you could be in this section, but without the mindset and you yourself and what's around you, what we've learned is the entrepreneur that just jumped into the business, they might have done the other things without telling you. And you might think, well, I'm doing all this stuff and how come it's not working? Well, because you're forgetting the whole mindset. You're forgetting the whole self. You're forgetting what's around you. Excuse me. And you want to think about all of these components that brings you here today. So the business side, we're going to talk about these 4 components. So let's just jump right into it. What you have, and this is, by the way, in the workbook, for those who did purchase the workbook, you will see that there's a resource. You want to list all the resources that you have. We're talking about cash. We're talking about equipments. We're talking about customer database. We're talking about suppliers. We're talking about employees. Anything that anything that you have is a resource today, right? This is a resource that you have. You want to make a list of all of it. You want to think about products, partners, all of it. Then you want to think about your what are you going to do with it, which we're going to learn next. By the way, customers, for those who think first, I have 10,000 customers, not possible for me to list all my customers. Agree with you, and you shouldn't. But what you can do is think about segmenting those customers by location, by industry, by size, by type, male, female, something else, by a corporation, by ethnicity, by level of income, by the subscriptions or the price that they pay for, whatever. Think about all the different ways that you could lump up if you have more than 1,000 of them in different categories. So therefore, you're not listing every single one because you probably don't. So you want to make a list of all the things that you have, including your equipments, including your cash, including your products or services, including your employees, their skills, any software subscriptions that you may have, any membership that you have from a chamber or an association, all of that. That's what you have today. You got to be quick, right? And initially, what we've learned from some of those entrepreneurs who do it really well, they resort really fast to the 5 or 6 resources that they have. Of course, top one being in cash in such crisis, to make sure that they have enough funds to keep them floating till they get to the end of it. The second question you want to say is, let's take any of these resources, just take one at a time. And those who have the worksheets, you can see that you could work that through, right? So let's just say you take one of them, just take one of these resources. And by the way, you could tell me whatever one you want, and we could take any of them, right? So yeah, sure, we could take an association. You're a member of a chamber. Fantastic. That's a resource that you have. Now you want to think about, how can you leverage it? Well, the first question you ask, do I need any upgrades or updates with this association? I'm a member, but it looks like I'm at the lowest membership. Is that going to be okay? And the answer could be yes. The answer could be like, that membership level doesn't give me access to the database. I need to update to get to the database. Okay, cool. Then you might want to think about updating. Or you might say, it's actually giving me enough to where I need to go, which is a committee, which I haven't served in any committee. So I need to start serving on a committee, whatever that is. So what we're doing is now we're taking the resource and we're asking the question, how can we leverage it? I have a space, I have a rental office, or I have a building. Fantastic. How can you leverage that? Well, I'm no longer using it. Can I convert it to be a studio to record? Hence what we're doing today. Okay. Whatever you want to do, think about what can you leverage with what you already have. Stop thinking about what you don't have and start thinking about what can you leverage with what you have. Do you need a perfect mic to start recording? Some people tell you yes. Many successful will tell you absolutely not. So with what you have, and then upgrade as you continue with your path. So that's what you want to do. You might say, well, first I have Adobe, software. That's something I have. Can I leverage it? Well, sure. Do you know how to use it? Oh, no, I don't know how to use it. Cool. Well, now you're going to have to learn. This is how you start to leverage it. You want to think about that. And then think about, can you repackage or repurpose any of the things that you have? Maybe in the beginning, you had a product that was shampoo and a conditioner and a body wash all together, and you were selling them as a package. Maybe you depackage it, or maybe you didn't have it as a package and now you package it, right? So thinking about what can you repurpose with what you have so you can leverage it. Remember, I mentioned earlier at your house. Well, now you can think about your office. What do you have in the office that could be leveraged? Do you have a garage that could be open so people could do a curbside pickup without having to come into the store? Do you have a way to put something away to make it work for you now? Think through all of these ideas of what can you repackage or repurpose with what you have to leverage it to move forward. And then the next thing you want to do is think about, now that you understand what you have and you have a list of it. Now remember, it doesn't have to be comprehensive, guys. Initially start with what you could think of and then keep adding later. You'll have these worksheets to go back and add. Okay, what else do I have? Let's add it. Then you go to the next question. How can I leverage that? Can I do anything with it? Well, I can't. Well, then let's get a call. Well, this is why you have a coach. The coach might be able to walk you through, this is how I've seen others leverage it. You may want to think about leveraging it this way, or you might want to think about leveraging it another way. Then you want to think about modifying your product or service. You might think about offering a new product or service. Maybe you didn't used to carry grocery stores in your restaurant, but maybe your customer's saying, you know what, can we pick up just at least eggs and flowers from you? And that might be an easy ad for you to start selling those items, since they're coming to pick up from you, that you could pick up. Or the grocery stores next door, you do the shopping for them, and for a small fee, you could have them pick up as well. We found many restaurant owners in the beginning doing some of that, especially around fresh vegetables and fresh produce, because they already had access to that, farmers and access to that network that they could easily afford to add it. And it made it a convenience for their customer, but also made them a little bit of cash to keep their business moving forward. So think through that, right? Am I offering a new product or a service? Can I modify my product or service now? Can I offer to a new segment? We've learned that some were never gone to a hospital, and throughout the COVID, they started going and offering services to the hospitals. They never cleaned the hospital. Now they're cleaning a hospital. They never offered food for, hospitals. Now they're offering food for hospitals. So think about all these things, or furniture or equipments. Don't start thinking, well, you're not talking about my business. I'm talking about your business right now. And the reason why you're excluding yourself, because you are choosing maybe not to listen to what I'm saying, which is, first, see what you have, then think about how you could leverage it, then think about how you could offer it. You could do it. I know you can because many before you did it. So think about that. New segment, new modifications of your product, or it could be a new product or service that you offer. So now that you offer it once, you want to think about piloting. So you offered it, people bought it, they didn't like it, they gave you some feedback, they liked it, they gave you feedback, whatever happened, you modify, and now you start testing and keep modifying. You thought, okay, I'm going to go after hospitals, and you got one, but you can't get the second or third. Well, again, you tested it, you modify it now, and maybe you go to maybe a nursing house, right? So think about what can be done with what you've offered so you could pilot to a different segments or different products or services. One thing I will say about the pilot is be ready to change. You thought you're going to offer it ABC, and the next offer, whether you like it or not, because you piloted once, could be BCD, and so on. So you have to think through that changes will keep coming, and you might want to think about continuing to develop new partnerships for your business with this new product or service or new segment of your customer. I use ISM, which is what we do here, as an example, because maybe it will give you a perspective. So we do entrepreneurship training. We provide strategies for economic development of organizations to get them to support entrepreneurs or small businesses in their communities. So what we used to do is I personally used to travel almost 200,000 miles a year on a plane to get to a meeting to speak to either an official, government person or an incubator accelerator executive to talk about ecosystem development, discuss some strategies that could be implemented, and potentially either deploying a program with them or providing them some ideas about what programs they could deploy in their community. Well, when COVID hits, just like everyone else, I actually was lucky to take the last plane to Washington, D.C. before the world shut down last year, March. And of course, I'm accustomed to coming back to either meetings in person in Detroit or meetings somewhere around Detroit. And I found myself, like everyone else, behind the screen. So we started immediately that Monday, actually, we had a call to say, if you are an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur that have been working with us or through our partners, anywhere in the world, go ahead and start calling us. We're going to have a call every Monday for the next 2 weeks, since the shutdown was supposed to be 2 weeks. And then we started offering that call, and we had hundreds of people from all over the world, over 2,000, call to discuss with us what they're doing and what they need to be learning to keep their business moving forward. And in between, we started filling in appointments or times to meetings with people, again, via Zoom or via other means, to make sure that we're on the schedule with people, talking to them, learning, and of course, sometimes learning for us what need to be doing and then providing it to them. That's really important. And then we started the first thing we did within 2 weeks, we started offering all of our programs online immediately. As a matter of fact, in March that year, we started offering online programming for anyone to come through the programs that we have. We went immediately from in-person to online. Now, it wasn't as easy as I'm making it sound. There were lots of nights, right? And lots of ways to stay up and make sure that we have those bugs worked. The fortunate thing for us, in many ways, we already had some components that were already online, such as workbooks were already online. Some of the softwares that we use already online. So we had to just maybe modify and edits, and then add new software that we didn't use before, upgrade some softwares we were using, and buy new softwares we never even knew that existed, right? We did all of those things. And then, of course, we had to rethink, because I know people say, well, whatever you did in person, do it online. Well, those who tried it that way know that it doesn't work that way. You have to modify it because it's not the same. People in person are not the same online. So we modified it. One example of that, some of our training used to be 3.5 hours in person. One of our programs we used to run in person all the time, Fast Track or Exploring Entrepreneurship. And we immediately moved into 1 or 2 or 3 times a week on a smaller of chunks, because now people are home being distracted. There are lots of things happening, so they couldn't handle it all by themselves in 1 3-hour chunk, because just too much to to be separated for that. They were already online for 3 hours for other things as well. So we addressed some of those things, which means the curriculum had to change, the delivery had to change. We no longer can hand out paper. Now we're asking them to do things in chat or in this section, like in Q&A. So you have to think through all of those things and redesign many. And we started with one. We modified it. Initially offered it for 12 weeks, then we offered it for 10 weeks, then now we offered for 8 weeks. And we kept modifying it till we got to where it works now. And we've been doing it now for a year or so, a year and a half. And then we start adding new programs. This Resilient Entrepreneur Program you're going through right now was a learning from what we were doing. Some people didn't have 10 weeks or 12 weeks. They needed like something really quick. So sure, we could do it in 1 day. As a matter of fact, we can do it in 2 days boot camp, 3 days boot camp, ideally 5 to 6 weeks, which seemed about the right time to get people through to help them, get over the hump. So I wanted to share that with you. So we looked at what we have, which was, we have all these resources, all these curriculums. What we can leverage is offering it differently. So new product, new service online, new segment. We used to work only with incubators, accelerators, economic development agencies. Well, now we have entrepreneurs or the people who work in those departments saying, I need professional development. I need to keep my skills sharpened. We start offering more of those programs that we used to do maybe once or twice a year to maybe monthly now. And then we started piloting. We tried it once, then we started offering it. And then once we start offering it and trying it a couple of times, we start piloting it again. And then once we pilot, we said, okay, this is a new product or service that now we offer. And we're fortunate to be doing this now in many countries all around the world. Again, not in person, but virtually these days. I hope that gives you some glimpse of what you could do for your business with this framework, as well as this resilient canvas that we're passing on to you from the learnings that we did personally, but of course with many other companies that we worked with as well. I believe that this canvas can make your decisions be more effective, save you some time, save you some money. And now last thing I'm going to talk about is moving forward. So we talked about your mindset, we talked about you and what's around you. We talked about your business, what you have, what you could leverage, what you could pilot and what you could offer. And now we're going to talk about, now that you have all this stuff, you understand how much cash you have, you understand what products you have, you understand what new service you want to be selling. You got to move forward. And moving forward requires a couple of things. These are the 5 top things that we believe is important. One is you want to think about operation, because you no longer could just schedule people to show up. You might have to, you might have to be creative with the schedule. So one of the companies we work with, he was sharing with me the insight of, he started scheduling people one at a time, one shift at a time. So therefore no more than 2 people in the building so far away from each other, which allowed them to be more creative. So, hey, you don't have to come from our regular hours, 8 to 5. You can come from 7 to noon, and you can come from noon to 5. Well, that allowed the employees to come to work because now they could manage to be away for a couple of hours, and also allowed him to keep the business moving forward because he didn't need all of them all at the same time. They all had different skills. So somebody was a framing person, one person was a software person, so allowed him to do all this stuff. So think about what you could do with the operation. Of course, one thing you want to remember in a crisis or times like this, you want to think about the safety and security of your people, because you might feel comfortable going to work, or you might not feel comfortable going to work, and someone might feel the opposite. You might not be in the high risk category, and this time is health. Next time could be economic crisis or family, whatever. You have to remember that what's comfortable for you is not necessarily comfort for your people or your customers. So you want to make sure that you are providing some safety and security in mind when you are moving forward. And then of course, time management, like I just mentioned earlier with the person dividing the time for their people. Well, that meant also that he had to put more hours. He had to come up and be creative about, do I give some of them a key or a lock so they could just come in and work when they need to and leave when they need to. So this is, again, part of moving forward is making sure that your time is managed. And then of course, communicating internally and externally becomes really key. Making sure that your customers see what you're doing to keep them safe. We saw some creative companies do some really creative things. For those who attended some of our workshops, I talked about a pizza place where they said, from the time it leaves the oven till the time it gets to your home, the only hands that it touch is your hands. And they had pictures of people showing how they all, pick up the pizza utensils out of this 450-degree oven. So it's a pretty good spot. They cut it with a glove and not touching the pizza. It gets put in the box without being touched. It gets boxed, it gets put in another box. It comes to your house, and that's when you take it out and you touch it with your hands. Well, although they've done this all along away before COVID, they made sure that they address that to their customers to make sure that they know that they're being precautious. And some of them actually saw some increase in their sales for those things that they did. I saw many of the other, restaurants like Kentucky Fried Chicken and many others do some creative ways to make sure that their people know that they are doing what they can to make sure everybody's safe. You want to do the same thing with your internal communication. So think through those steps as you move forward. That's really those 5 bullet points or 5 steps for moving forward. And by now you have this canvas with you. So you saw with your mindset, you think about yourself and you and around you. You think about your business, what you have, what you can leverage, what you offer, what you could pilot, and you think about moving forward and how to keep it going. I want to bring this up back to remind you that you might want to think about startup versus growth mode, because these are 2 different mindsets. Startup mindset I call a survival mindset, and sometimes you might have to refer to that if your business is struggling right now. You might want to think about startup mode. So think about what resources do you have that you could leverage it to move forward. And many actually could be in a spot where you are in a growth mode. You have so much demand that you could potentially be acquiring other businesses or expanding because you're in the right spot. Now, remember, no matter which one you choose or being imposed onto you, you have to think about what happens post. How do you plan to keep that going? What ideas can you keep thinking about what we just discussed today to keep this business moving forward and continue the growth or continue the surviving to start becoming growing as we move out of or become post of COVID? So my question to you, what action steps do you plan to do right now? I hope that this frame of work that we shared with you today could give you insights and inspire you to take some action today with your business to keep going. This program is designed for those who are already in business to keep it going. For those who are aspiring to be, with other better fits for you, such as exploring entrepreneurship. And of course, we've done this for also some startups, especially overseas in many of the countries we work with, by modifying some of the wordings that we use and modifying the process that we take. But the same process can be applied for really startup or growth. The difference is you already have things in business for those who are in business. For those who are starting up, you don't have things there, but you can think about your skill set as a business, and you can think of it that way to start leveraging it and then piloting it and then offering it, or offering it and then piloting it. So my question to you, what steps are you going to take now? I want to tell you, just remind you that you have to test it. You have to keep going, and it's okay to fail. Nothing is perfect today. Anyone that tells you that they're perfect, I'm sorry to say that they're not. So we aim to be perfect. We continue the pathway to be perfect, or perfection per se. I struggle with it personally, and I know that many do as well. But the key is to just keep going towards that perfection, but not to stop to say, I won't do it unless it's perfect. I encourage you to download this free copy of the Resilient Canvas with the points. And obviously you have a copy of this webinar. I appreciate you being with us today. I appreciate you taking the time. I want to thank you for being here. And I want to thank you for being with us today. For those who would like to stay in touch, here's my contact information, and would love to, of course, hear from you some thoughts or feedback. Please use your phone to scan this QR and provide your feedback to us. Thank you so much. Have a great day.